Students, I'm going to be showing you today how we can do our actual compositing. Compositing a subject photo onto a background photo. And so I grabbed this photo from photographer Diana Ken Reyes. And so I'm actually going to be opening up this photo into Camera Raw. You can obviously adjust your original photo in Camera Raw. So maybe you need to adjust the colors, texture, clarity, all those different basic adjustments. You can always modify it after once you kind of put them together. So right now I'm just going to open this into Photoshop. Actually, I might set to 16-bit. Yours will probably be working in 8-bit. And so what we want to do is put a different background behind our subject. So what I'm going to do first is actually go to Layer and duplicate my background layer. Hit OK. So I should have two layers of the same photo of the subject. Then what I need to do is go back to Bridge. I'm going to select a photo that I downloaded from Unsplash. So again, if you have an Unsplash account, so if you go to unsplash.com and splash.com, you can sign up with a free account. I use mine through my Facebook, but it is completely free to set up an account and to save royalty-free photos that people use for editing purposes like this. And so this one I just searched for, water texture. And so you'll see premium ones that you have to pay for. If you scroll down, there'll be more results with that are free. And so if you click on one, you can choose the download option and it'll save it to your computer. So this one, I believe, was this photo here. So for the background, I'm going to open it. So again, I can open this into Photoshop. And so you should have two different tabs, the original photo and the background photo. So subject photo, background photo is two tabs. I'm just going to go to my Move tool. And what I'm going to do is move my background photo onto my subject photo. So easiest way of doing that is click on the tab in the top, drag and then pull it away so it detaches from the top tab. So drag it over. Then what you can do is click inside the photo, hold the click, drag and drop onto your subject photo. Sometimes it might be color profile issues, just hit OK. So it should look something like this. You should have your two background layers and then your subject layer. Again, you can turn off each layer using the little I button here. I'm going to close this out just to get out of the way. So obviously, you can see my subject photo is shot at a different resolution than the background photo is much smaller than my subject photo. And so what we can do is free transform it to make it bigger, so it's the same size. So I'm just going to go to Edit and down to Free Transform. The shortcut is Command T. So if I click on one of these corners, I can pull it out and extend it out. So I pretty much just want to make it the right size, that it covers the full frame, and then hit the check to confirm my free transform. And again, I can see under my layer by turning this layer off with the little I button here. Alright, so what we want to do is get my layers in the right order. And so I'm going to click on the background copy. So let's just call this subject, and this layer background. So then I'm just going to click on this layer and drag it above my background layer so it's on top. So again, you can move the order. You'll see like a little blue line show up. So I'm just going to click my subject to move it over my background. So you should have your subject layer, then your background layer. So whatever is on top will be the one that's the closest to the viewer and facing the viewer in Photoshop. So whatever's on top will be the one you see visibly. So what we need to do is use a selection method to select our subject and to cut her out and mask her out is what they call it in Photoshop. So again, if I go to my quick selection tool, I could select her by hand and just go through and select the subject. Sometimes it'll select the right, sometimes it'll select the wrong, but obviously you can add it with the plus mode and subtract from it in the minus mode. So you can add and remove. So that is one method of selecting your subject. The newest option, I'm just going to go to Select, Deselect. The newest option is the Select Subject feature, where Photoshop does its best guess to analyze your photo and figure out what your subject is. Sometimes it guesses right, sometimes it guesses wrong. This one I did pretty well. And again, because I have these plus and minus, I can keep adding to, if it missed kind of anything, I can keep adding to my selection. I just want to make sure I got everything before I cut her out. So once I like my selection, I'm just going to go down to the bottom right. So below my layers, there's this little rectangle with a circle in it, and that's, if you hover over it, it'll say add layer mask. So I'm just going to click on that, and when I click on it, you can see in my history the add layer mask. It adds the layer mask, and basically anything inside your selection will be white, which will show on a layer mask, and anything outside the selection will be black, so it won't show that part of the layer. And so you can see here there is some like weird edges and stuff. We're going to correct that in a bit, but just showing you how that layer mask works. So again, once you have it selected, just click down here on the little layer mask, and then I'll cut it out. So to refine these edges, you know, if I zoom in here, you can see this kind of like out of focus edges should be soft, but they're really hard. You know, these edges should be soft because they're out of focus, but they're also hard. The hair is not doing so well. So what I want to do is go to my select and mask option to refine my selection. So I'm going to click on select and mask. Make sure you're not on the quick selection tool, you're actually on the refine edge brush tool, the second one from the top. And what you want to do is just paint around the edges. And so you'll see it might take off some stuff you want, it might leave other stuff you don't, but for the most part the refine edge tool, when you start painting around, it'll kind of update each time you let go of the tool. But it usually does a better job because you're helping Photoshop understand where the edges are that you're trying to cut out on your subject. And again, we can correct a lot of these, you know, issues after, and just kind of helping it, you know, get, especially, you know, with these softer edges here, a more soft cutout, because it was a little out of focus, and you wouldn't have a hard edge with, you know, in reality. And so you can do global refinements here. You can shift the edge in, which will basically cut in more, which I might want to do a little bit of that. Contrast, if you want to make it, if it's like a soft fuzzy edge, you want to make it harder, you can increase the contrast. And you can also feather and smooth out the edge. And the smooth option is basically if there's like a bumpy, jaggedy edge, it will kind of smooth it out so it's like a nice kind of smooth edge. Once you're happy with that, you can click OK, and I'll take you back to Photoshop. This is my before and after. You can see, especially in the hair, did a lot better job with my selection, refining it like that. So obviously there's some parts that I need to kind of paint back, and then some parts that, you know, I can maybe take off more. And so what I can do then is make sure you're on your layer mask, not on your photo, but on the layer mask, and then click on the brush. So again, you can adjust the brush size and the hardness of the edge. So if you have a sharp hard edge, I would increase the hardness. If you got a soft edge, I would lower the hardness on that. And then you could do 100% flow, or you could do a lower flow if you want to kind of blend it in more. I'll keep it at 100% for now. So right now, like, it took away some parts. So whatever I want to paint back, I'll have my brush set to white, and I can paint it back with white. Because again, white shows and black doesn't show. So if I paint with white, I'll paint back. So like her shoulder here, right, that's actually a harder edge, so I'm going to increase the hardness here. And so I'm just going to paint back, you know, the part of the shoulder kind of took off. A little shortcut, if you click, hold down the shift button and do a next click, it'll go in a straight line. And if you kind of keep holding down shift, you can kind of go around the subject pretty easy. So if I click, oh, sorry, I'll go back to black, so black doesn't show. So I click, hold on the brush, hold down shift, and keep clicking while I'm holding down shift. It'll go around in a straight line, basically connecting from the start of the brush to the end of the brush click. This is pretty soft edge, so I'm going to move this to a soft edge, and again switch my brush to a white brush. I'm just going to paint back some of this thumb here. There we go. And then again, I can paint off stuff by switching that to black. So whatever you want to show will be white, and whatever you don't want to show will be black. Alright, so that's looking pretty good for my selection. So in reality, as you can see, like her hand's going out of focus, but the background's super sharp and in focus. So if I want to control the depth of field, you could click on your background layer and go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and then you could add some blur, right? So depending on how shallow depth of field you want, you could adjust the blur radius. Maybe about there is good. And you will notice the more you kind of modify each layer, that sometimes you might need to keep adjusting your edges on your mask, but I'll get to that in a second. The other thing I'm noticing is my background colors have like a kind of cyan-y in the shadows and kind of warm in the highlights, and it's much different colors than the one that's in my subject photo. So if you want to add adjustment layers to your either your subject layer or your background layer, you can add adjustment layers and attach them just to that layer. So right now if I did an adjustment layer, so click on this little half and half circle, and let's go to color balance. So if I did an adjustment, it's going to apply it to both layers. So right, it applies it to the background and my subject layer. But at the bottom of the adjustment layer, if I click here, it shows a little clipping. It'll clip it to the layer. So if I press that, now it's just attached just to my subject layer. So then, right, it's only affecting my subject layer. So then I'll actually fix this so it's actually correct. Let's go, maybe, here we go. I'm actually going to go in my shadows and adjust those to kind of match the cyan blue a little bit more. Let's go to her highlights and just add a little bit, maybe a little bit of warmth. There we go. And so now that adjustment layer is just to the subject layer. If I wanted to brighten her up, I can click on my adjustment layers and do a levels adjustment. Again, I'm going to clip it to that subject layer. So now it's attached to that subject layer. And then I can adjust, my brightness. So I got my highlights, midtones, and shadows. And then how dark something gets, I basically fade it up and fade it down. And so I'm just going to adjust it to kind of the same brightness as my background. Let's actually go bring this up and fade it a little bit. There we go. Bring this down. There we go. So it's looking pretty good. And the same for my background. If I need to adjust my background, just make sure you click on your background layer, add an adjustment layer. So if I do levels, I'm going to clip it to it by pressing this little button. And then whatever I adjust here will only affect my background because it's attached to my background layer. So that's using adjustment layers and clipping it to your layers on selected. So what I want to do next is just show you how to make a quick shadow. And so what you can do is when you're on your subject layer with your mask, if you press Command and then click on the mask, it's going to load the selection. I'll show you that one more time. So when you click on the mask, press Command and click, and it will load your selection. Once that is selected, basically what we want to do is I'm just going to create a new layer. So I'm actually going to go just underneath my layer and create a new layer. This little plus icon next to the trash can will create a new layer. So once I'm on my new layer, all I'm going to do with my selection loaded, I'm going to go to Edit and Fill. And you could have it to your foreground color. If it's something else, you could just do black. You could switch your foreground. I'm just going to hit Cancel. So if you wanted like a little bit brown color, like a brown shadow, you could change the color, right, of your shadow. Or you can just do black, which is the easiest. So I'm just going to use black. So I'm just going to go to Edit and then Fill. And then you could just choose black. Right now my foreground color is black. The foreground's on the top, the background's on the back, on the bottom. So it's going to fill that in with black. So you can see here my layers, it filled in this selection with black. So I'm just going to deselect my selection. So I'm going to go Select, Deselect. And then if I get my Move tool, so I'm going to make sure I'm on my layer I filled in. So I actually call this layer Shadow. If I use my Move tool, there's my shadow, right? That's what I created. So obviously, like no shadow would be that sharp and in focus unless it was like super hard light. So what you could do is, again, add a Gaussian blur and adjust the blur on it. So maybe you want to give it a little softer edge, like softer light. This is pretty soft light. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And then what you can do is obviously you can reduce the opacity on it. So then, depending on your lighting condition, how hard that light would be, how dark your shadow would be. So you can adjust your opacity on it. You can also play with the blending modes. Like I recommend a multiply blending mode. It usually does a better job. You can also do a contrast, soft light or hard light blending mode. You can kind of see what it does to your shadow. So that actually looks pretty good. And again, because it's on its own layer, just make sure you have your shadow layer selected, and you can move it around, you know. And then if you need to, I'll turn off my subject layer. If you have your shadow layer selected, you can go to edit and then free transform, just like we did for a background, and you can, you know, adjust the size of it. You could, if you right click inside of it, you can choose different options to distort it. And so you can actually, you know, change the angle of it if you needed to kind of match your background by choosing the distort option. And once you have it the way you want, just hit the check and that'll commit the free transform. And so then, you know, I have my layers all pretty much good to go. So I probably wouldn't use that shadow because right now you wouldn't really see a shadow. But just showing you how to make it. So I'm just going to throw that shadow layer in the trash can. So once I'm happy with my composite, I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I want to save this in the correct format. So make sure you save it as a Photoshop format. The reason why you want to save it as Photoshop format is because it'll save your layers. So I'm just going to call this like Composite 1, make sure it's in the right folder, and it's saved as a Photoshop format. So I'm just going to save and OK. So then, while I'm working on my composite, if I go back to Bridge, there's my Composite 1. If I double click and open it into Photoshop, I can go back to my layers and keep working on it. I can keep modifying my selection, and I can maybe keep, you know, working on the mask if I want to. And then once I'm happy, I'm actually going to not use that. Once I'm happy with my finished composite, that last step I need to do is save this out as JPEG. So I'm just going to go to Layer and flatten all my layers. So Layer, Flatten Image. It's going to combine all my layers together. And then I'm going to go File, Save As. And let's change our format to a JPEG. So now I can actually upload a JPEG to a Google Slide or to a Flickr online. And so I'm just gonna, so you should have 2 files per composite. You should have your PSD. So I actually want to see your layers and actually click on it and be able to see what you did. And then you should have your JPEG, which you can actually upload to your Google Classroom and when you turn it in. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody.